Okay, cool. My computer's in for repair, so I have to use my laptop. It might be a little bit sluggish, but it should be fine. But I do apologize if there's sort of any hiccups along the way. Okay, so let's get this started. I'm going to first work through some of the things that people asked about in chat, as well as highlight some things that I think are important. Okay, so the first stuff that we're going to be looking at today is, sorry, I've lost my window. Give me a second. Okay, so I think the first thing we're going to be looking at is sets, I believe. Sorry, just hold on. Yeah, sets. Okay, so I'll just create a random file here. I'm first going to create an index.html. Zoom in so you can all see index.html. And then we're going to use our emit because we're lazy and it does everything we need to. And then I'm going to go and create a JavaScript file. So I'll just call this script.js and I'll split this down. Actually, I won't even split that down because we won't need the index.html. Okay, so we've got our script file and our console log and say script loaded. And then we'll go and load our script. And again, yeah, there's another image you can use. So you can start typing script and you can see there's one that's got the source already for us. So we're going to add our source. And then when adding a file, you always want to .. So you can pick what the file you want. And the reason for that is because your script file might have a bunch of nonsense like that. And this just ensures that it's going to load correctly. Okay, so we're going to go and load in that script.js file. And then lastly, we want to defer so that it's going to only run after our HTML has run in the body. Okay, so I'm going to save that. And then we're going to pop this open with live server. Try and move this out the way. Oh, this just made things worse. So I was going to move it into my other monitor. I've got another monitor connected. Yeah. Okay, cool. So now that shouldn't be in the way. Right. So got this open. Now I just got to push this to the side and then grab the other one that I had. This one, yeah. Put it out. Put this back. Okay. Right, and I've just got our class notes open as well so that I can cover our content. Well, the content is exactly as it's written. This is brand new content, so there are probably going to be a couple of flaws along the way. But with our new system, anything that needs to get changed, I can immediately go and change it. So if you do stumble across something and you feel that it doesn't explain it well, you just let me know. And likely by the end of the day, I'll have an update to the lesson. So it's sort of like a living, breathing lesson. If there's anything that you don't understand in the lessons and you think that it should be explained better, please do let me know and I will immediately jump on it and get something in, hopefully by the end of the day that I find out. Okay. Right. So we've got our file loaded. We're just going to check that by seeing that it console logs. The reason why I'm doing this is because you might have a typo when you try to load the script and you don't know that there's actually a typo. So this lets me know, okay, look, it's loaded, there's no issues. Okay, so we're going to look at sets first, right? Well, that happened. We look at sets. Okay, so the main thing about a set is, well, firstly, you don't often use sets. We had feedback regarding the lesson and people thought that, look, they do exist, so let's add them in there. So we have added sets in, but you probably won't come across them a lot, very seldomly. There will be a couple of use cases, and if you do remember to use it, you will definitely impress the people that are you're working with or you're interviewing, all of that. And like the main thing about sets is that it will only take unique values. That's basically, just think of it like an array, except it just takes unique values. So if we had an array like this, zoom this in a bit more, const my array is equal to, and then let's say we've got these values here, and let's say these were indexes or like IDs for people, and we repeated this. So we've repeated these three values here. So I'm going to console log this. And you can see that we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Now that's repeated. What if we wanted to have like an array that we couldn't repeat values in it? So then you'd have to do like, if I wanted to go and push to this, we'd have to have something like a function like check array. And then say if I wanted to add a value to it, let's call it an index. And then we were going to go and push this index to it. So push index. So we were going to push it. And if we were to try and add another 3, we'd have to go and check. We'd have to say something like if my array dot includes, and then the index, and we'd actually have to say not includes, then we could go and push this value. Okay, so this goes and it will check, does our array actually have this value in it? And if it doesn't, then we can go and push it. But this is an expensive operation, because what it's doing is it's looping through each item and it's going and checking it. So if this was like 1,000, 1,000,000 items, it's actually a bit of an expensive operation to run this each time. So that's where a set comes into the picture, is that a set is going to only allow unique values. Okay, so I'll leave this example and I'll put it up here, and then we'll keep moving on down here. And okay, so we'll create a new set. So I'm going to say const my set is equal to new set. I might have to look at the syntax for this. I do apologize. That is part of web development, or being a developer, is that you're not expected to remember these things off by heart. You're just expected to know how to implement these things or how to code with them, and come up with solutions. And if you do find developers that seem like they know all the solutions or they know all the stuff, so they've just got more experience working with it. They aren't this amazing person that are really great at math and they know everything. It's just they've got more exposure to it. So don't ever it's easy to get sort of disappointed with yourself or frustrated, but everybody is there. You just don't see it. Okay, so we've got our set here. Now what we can do is we can say my set, and we can add. Okay, so I can add a value now. I'm going to add 0, and then I'm going to check what the set is. I can't actually even remember how to check a set. My set dot values. Let's try that. No. I'm gonna have to just quickly go and Google here. So this is how seldomly I actually work with sets. I'd probably actually wait. Maybe if I actually just call this as a function. Okay, so there we can see there is just got the 0 in it. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add 3 more values, and this will be 1, 2, 3, and let's just confirm that this is actually working. Okay, so we can see that we've got 0, 1, 2, 3. Whoops. These values have all been added because we've added them over here. Okay, so if we had an array, we would have gone and said my array dot push 0, and then this would have been sort of the same thing as this. And then we'll just do this. And I know this might be obvious, but I'd rather cover it so that it's going really in depth into it. Okay, so we've got our values that are pushed or added, and you can see that they are added just like our other array. Now, if I try and add this again, so I'm going to add 3 like we did earlier. So add 3, and I'm going to do that 3 times, and I'll save it. Now, can you see in our array, we had these values added here. We'll just pretend we didn't actually physically add them there. But when we try and actually add them to a set, it's not going to add these. They're only going to be unique values. Okay, so with some creativity and imagination, you might find a good place to use this, where you only want to have sort of unique values. Then you can make use of a set. I'm trying to think of a use case. I'm gonna have to come back to this to actually think of like an actual proper use case. Like I'm thinking of maybe like a shopping cart. You could maybe have a set where you only want a single item to actually be added, or maybe a game. You only want a certain player. You can't add a player more than once. So you'd only be able to add a player character one time, and only that one time. So it's these cases where you'd only ever be adding unique values to a set of values like this. Okay, so that is sets. It really is. That's basically all you kind of need to know about sets to start. Like that's what you need to remember. You don't need to remember all the methods and how to do all the methods. What you need to remember is how you're going to use a set, and a set becomes valuable to you as a developer when you want to deal with a set of values that only has unique values. Okay, I also want to check if there's any questions. Any questions on set? Otherwise, we're going to move on. I don't think it's a good use of your time to show like how to remove and how to do the rest of the stuff. That is intuitive. Like you can just say my set dot delete, and we can delete 3. And we'll do this again. Okay, so you can see that 3 has been deleted. So the rest of it's quite intuitive. You don't have to like delete like you do an array, which is actually a bit more complicated than dealing with a set. Okay, so just pop your questions in chat. You don't have to wait for me to finish talking. You can immediately jump in if you have a question. Even while I'm talking, you can jump on your microphone and just jump in. I'd rather that than you leave your questions towards the end. Okay, so that is the set. Okay, so I'm going to move on from this. Unless anybody's got questions regarding set. Just remember that it's for unique values. That's the main thing you want to remember. And if you have an interview question and they ask you if what could you do about an array to have unique values, or in like a coding challenge, try and remember the set. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this stuff over here. I already have actually, but double check for good. All right, so we're going to look at classes now. Okay, so classes come from object-oriented programming. So let's add some information. Okay, so there is a certain programming paradigm, which is just a fancy word for programming style or way of thinking about it, where we link objects. We try and take the world, all the objects around the world, and turn them into objects that we can deal with. So you end up with something like relational database relationships, and it's fine if you don't understand what I mean by that, but for those that you do, that might be helpful. But what you end up with something like this, where you've got a student, okay, and this is going to be an object, and then you'll also have something like a class, classroom. Okay, I don't want to confuse you with the other thing, and show you what I mean in a moment. I'm going to have to just do a little bit of drawing here. Okay, your students can have something like an ID. So maybe it's a number. So I'll give you an example in the brackets. Then we'll have something like their first name, just a string. Let's just go with good old Ola. And then we're going to have last name, string, Ola. And then we'll just say is online, which is a Boolean. And we'll give you an example of it, true or false. Just as something, as a tip, whenever you got a Boolean, if you want to sort of make your code go sort of next level and look really professional, when you've got a Boolean, use is or has when it comes to naming your Boolean. This is like a hot tip. You'll see this at the workplace, the really professional places. So if I have something like is online, that I've already showed you the example, or like is admin, or something has logged in, when you start seeing this pattern, and you will see it at the workplace, and you'll even read about this in certain books when it comes to writing clean code, this is sort of a really clean way of dealing with your Boolean. So when it comes to writing your if statements, you say if is online, then you do your stuff. So the whole idea is that you want to get your code to become readable in an English way. We want to write code that is understood by a human, not understood by a computer. So this is very intuitive when I'm reading. If it's just online, that's like hard to say what that really means. Is that going to be like a constant? Like, is it just going to be, is it actually their status of being online, or is it like a whole object or something? Whereas if you go with this sort of naming convention for your Booleans, and it's just your Booleans, your is or has, this is, so you'll find this a lot. And this is really, I don't know if you agree with me, but this is really easy to read as a human. So that's just a bit of a tip there. Okay, so going to move on here. Let's just move this over. Okay, so we've got like a student object here, and a student will have, a classroom will have multiple students. So you will have this classroom here, and then there will be something like list of students, and that might link these ID numbers. And then you might have something like module for classroom. Okay, so what we've done is we kind of modeled how the real world kind of exists. You know, we've got a student, and the student has an ID number. That student has a first name and a last name, and they have sort of, you know, they're either an online student or they're not. And then we're going to have this object classroom, which is going to have multiple students in it. Okay, so it becomes like objects that you code around with, and it's object-oriented programming. Now, it's considered a little bit dated, at least in the world of JavaScript, to work with object-oriented programming. Let's just go and write it here. There is still a place in the world for it, but people tend to be moving on to things like functional programming and stuff like that. But there is definitely still a place for object-oriented programming. The reason why you'll end up seeing people saying, people in JavaScript will say that it's not an object-oriented programming language. It's not OOP. And that's because when it comes to classes, they aren't implemented exactly like the way they are in other programming languages. So people say that you can't really have true object-oriented programming in JavaScript, but we still do it all the time. And you do it without even like actually even noticing it. There's certain things like event listers and things like that, which you can argue to be part of the object-oriented paradigm of with the way that things are listening and they've connected. So it definitely still does happen, but you don't write your classes like conventional object-oriented programming like you would do in C++, where you've just got all these objects and they're all linked and they've got interfaces and all of these things. What would happen when I say interface is there might be a third set of code here, which is called like the student classroom interface. And that would expose a method like add student to classroom so that a student can get added to the classroom. Yeah. Okay. So, but don't like stress about this stuff too much. You know, I was in the JS2 content, I was thinking of actually doing a whole module on object-oriented programming, but the benefit is not there. It's just not worth the benefit for you to learn about this. Like, it's good to dive into it in your own time. But yeah, you're gonna not really be required to learn this kind of stuff, not for the work that we're doing. Maybe if you jump into Python or something else, then it might become a bit more intuitive, more useful. What will be very useful to you though is learning about functional programming, which was going to be the other module we were going to add. But it was hard. Like this becomes a bit in depth. Like this can be a bit complicated. So we decided to give that one a skip. But if you want to like level up your JavaScript programming, learn about functional programming. Seriously, this is like when you're using array methods, that's functional programming. So if you do want to like look further into stuff, have a look at functional programming. Okay, so we're going to have a look at classes. I'm going to have to move a bit quicker. So the way you do it is you have a keyword that's class, and then you're going to have something like your class. So we're going to have like a person. Actually, let's do the student like we had above. Okay, so we're going to have a student class, and I won't be surprised if I mess the syntax up. I don't think you're supposed to have that. Okay, right. So we've got the student class, and they will have I'm actually just going to hard code some stuff for now. Yeah, it's been so long. I might actually have to go and Google some of the syntax here. Yeah, hold on. Maybe I just got to say, I don't have to say const. Sorry, I'm going to have to look up the syntax here. I'm so sorry. It's just like I honestly barely ever work with classes myself. You know, I work with React a lot, and there we've moved on from classes to functional components. So don't often actually get that much exposure to classes, but they are still important to know how to use them. And you will have questions in interviews about classes. Okay, so I'm just going and pulling up the coursework here. Just give me a second. Because I messed up by making it like a object. Okay, that's where I messed up. Okay, because in classes you don't actually use the const keyword or your variable keywords. They are created within the scope of the instance of this class. So just want to add this to my library. I'm using a spell checker there. Let me see if I can undo that. No, I can't. I highly recommend getting this extension if you don't. Like even at really sort of prestigious companies and code bases, I've seen people that don't use it. and it's just embarrassing for them. There is an extension called Code Spell Checker. You should definitely be making use of this. Sorry, I'm gonna have to just zoom out. Here we go. You can see it's got $5.2 million. You should always make use of this. It can be a little bit annoying when it shows you the blue lines. So you see blue lines like that. But after a while, you start boarding to your own spelling, what is it, like your own dictionary, and it gets added to your VS Code. The only thing is that when you do add it, don't add it to the workspace, because that means everybody's going to get that file. You want to add it to your user settings. And then it's going to remember that word. So now Notman is always going to be remembered on this computer. But yeah, so I've seen people that have been in the game for over a decade, and they make really bad spelling errors, and then people use it, and then you can't change that code. There might be like a tracking event, and then you can't go in and change the tracking event, because now they're tracking off that tracking event, and then that spelling errors there for now eternity. So don't try and avoid that situation. It's that easy to avoid it. Just get the extension. Okay, so we've got our class here, and this is sort of just the basic of what a class is. What I actually want to do is we're actually going to make a use of a constructor here. So let's actually take this out. We're going to have a constructor, and a constructor is basically when something's getting initialized, a constructor will run. It's from your C++ days and all of that when you're going to be calling this, creating an instance of this class, this constructor will run to assign your values. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to have our first name and our last name. What if I might have to say this? Yeah, I might have to say this dot first name. Okay, and then we're going to have this dot last name is equal to last name. Okay, so this is our class. So now the class is a blueprint of code. And then we can copy this blueprint over and over and over and over for each student. So we've got our main blueprint. It's like design plans for like an architect's got like the blueprint for a building. And then from that blueprint, you can build a million different buildings. And they are all instances from that architect's blueprint. Okay, so they have gone and drawn out that architectural blueprint. It's that building design, and then all the builders can go and build buildings from that design. And those are all instances from that blueprint. So we've got the same thing here, where we've got this blueprint of a student, and then we can create almost like real students, which are instances from this class. So let's actually do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say const student1 is equal to new student, and then I've opened the brackets here, and VS Code's got TypeScript running in the background. So it's actually able to go and check all the types and everything for us. That's why you've actually got this information here. If you know a little bit of TypeScript, you can see that these are any types, because it doesn't know what type it's going to be. But this is useful though. Try and always make use of this information that pops up here. And we can see we need to pass in a first name, and we need to pass in a last name. Okay, so we're going to go with Ola, and then we're going to say Notman. Okay, so this has now created an instance of this class. What I'm actually going to do, I'm actually going to add a method here. So I'm going to say greet student. Okay, and note we don't have to say const let and var here. And I'm going to say console log hello, and then we're going to need the name. So I'm actually going to use a string template here. I'm going to say hello, and then their first name. So this dot first name, and we have to use this here. So that refers to the instance that we're creating. And then hello. Actually, I'm just going to copy this. Yeah, save it. Okay, so now there's this method that exists on this, and I'm going to call it. So I'm going to say student1 dot greet student, and then I want to save. Okay, so you can see here that it says hello Ola Notman, but I want an exclamation there. Okay. So it's logging out this message. So this is the first instance we've created of the student. This is our blueprint, and then we're creating actual instances of it. Or like in our architectural example, these are actual buildings that have been created. So what I can do is I can actually just create a whole bunch of students. So I'm going to go and create student 2 and student 3. Let's go with Corey. And today I can be a Nordman. Okay, so we're going to go and say student 2.greet student, student 3.greet student. 7. Okay, so you can see that we've created all these instances from the student. If you're interested in things like game development, this is where classes can be really useful. So you can have something like your game class, and then you can have something like an enemy class, right? So imagine this was actually an enemy. Shouldn't go and change it, but I've just changed it here for now. And then you could have something like their attack speed and their weapon damage, and their hit points and all of that. And then and that'll be sort of all your methods in here. And then you can have a player class, which is an actual player, and there you will take in, like your player name, the color of like the clothing color, like red or blue, so you can identify it's player 1 or player 2. And then which one is player 1, which was in player 2. So there are good use cases where classes can come into play. And games is a good one. Like if you ever actually want to sort of look at classes and building JavaScript games, go and see how games are made in C++, and then you can actually slowly kind of try and translate that into JavaScript. Because a lot of the stuff will be the same, but then some of the features will be missing. Okay, so when it comes to creating a class, let me just actually put this back to student. Okay, so when it comes to creating a class, you need to use this new keyword. Sorry, when you're creating an instance of a class, so you need to use this new keyword, and then it's going to create this instance of the class. Okay, so I'm going to check if there's any questions. No questions. Anybody have any questions about classes? No. Okay, so then I think what we're going to be looking at, wait, there was one more. There was references. Okay, so let me go, and this will copy paste. This one is classes. This one was sets, just in case any of you want me to share that code afterwards. And then we'll delete this. And now we're going to be looking at pass by value and pass by reference. Okay, cool. So in JavaScript, you've got primitives, primitive types. Oh, how did I spell that wrong? So let's go. This is an example of where I should have actually had the right spelling. So I've checked spelling here, and then I changed it to primitive. Got it correct. Okay, so primitive types. So your primitive types are things like numbers, strings. Let's just make it hello world. And then what is another one? We've got Boolean, true or false. Okay, so these are examples of primitive types. You've then got types that are complex, like arrays and objects. So I'm not sure if complex types is the right term, but let's go with that for now. We've got arrays. And then you've got objects. Okay, so right. Okay, so you got these are these complex types. So you've got these arrays and you've got these objects. Now, when I have a function and I pass these primitive types into that function, you can go and change that variable that's being passed in, and it's not going to impact a variable outside the function. When you are passing these complex types in, they're actually being passed by reference. And that means that if you modify them in the array, they're actually going to modify them in a function, they're actually going to modify that original data source that you have. So let's actually look at what that means. So we're going to just create a function here. We're going to call it modify data. And we'll call this, let's create an array here. 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then we're going to go and call our function modify data with my array. And then we need to get our array here. So let's just say array. And we'll console log array. Okay, so we've got this array. Actually, I'm gonna put it up. Yeah, it should probably make more sense. Okay, so we've got this function, modify data, and we're passing in an array to this data here. Oh, sorry, we're passing in this array to this function, and then we console logging it. Okay, so if I was to go and say array.push, and let's just say hello world, save it. It's going to end. Okay, well, let me actually work through this again. So we're calling modify data with this array, and it's getting passed in here. And then we're pushing a value to it. Now, what's going to end up happening is that this original variable is going to get modified. Okay, because it's actually a reference to this that's getting passed in. It's not a new array that's actually getting passed into this. If it was a primitive type, then you can mutate them. You can change the values. And it's not going to impact the one on the outside. But if it's a complex type like this, it's actually being passed in as a reference. And a reference means that it's like a, what is the right term here? It's almost like a linked version. It's a version that's linked because it's referring to this one. So it's almost like there's an arrow that's like connecting these two together. So when you're changing it inside here, you're actually changing this original array. So let's just have a look at console log. Okay, so outside of this function, if we console log my array, can you see that we've actually mutated the data? We've added hello world to this data. Okay, so now this can be very bad because you might, inside of this, want to work with these values and say that this is a list of prices or something. But inside here, you wanted to do calculation, and then you had to do something, and you had to modify that array. But then what you actually end up doing is you modify this array for the whole application. And that's really, really bad. In JavaScript, we want to have pure functions, which is part of functional programming. We want to have pure functions, and that means that we are not modifying something outside of this. The work we're doing is inside of this, and it's not having side effects. Like this is called a side effect that's happened here, where we've added this on, this value here. That's a side effect, and we don't want that to happen. So this is really bad. This is actually really, really bad what's happened here. This is, I mean, if you've got a financial application and now you suddenly got the wrong values, or let's say it's even worse than that, it's a healthcare application. This can end up creating very buggy code, and it can be really hard to capture because we've said hello world, but what if it had just been another number like 6 and we save it? Now, you're not going to know that a side effect took place here. It's really difficult to tell. So this isn't good. So what you generally want to do is while you're in your function, you'd actually want to create a new array. And there's various ways of doing it, but this is the easiest way, is you create an array, or square brackets like that, and you spread out your array. Okay, so this array now is a new version of this array. You can't just say this, like this. You can't just go and say new array is equal to array, because all this is now is a reference to that reference, and this reference is a reference to this reference, or this original variable. So if I was to do this, save it, we still got our 6. Okay, let's actually make it not 6 anymore. Let's make it back to hello world so you can see it. Or let's say this should not be okay. So we've got this added here. So you can't do this because this is now just creating another reference, right? So let's go over the references again. We've got this variable and we pass it into modify data. But now when it's over here, it's linked to this. I wish I could draw like an arrow, but it's referencing this array. So if we modify this over here, it's modifying this, because whatever we do here it's sort of like going back to this and then going back to here and modifying this main one. Okay. And that's, yeah, so that's just really, really bad. Like we don't ever want to be doing that. It's called mutation or mutation. This is going to be an interview question, most likely going to be an interview question, like, why shouldn't you modify? Why should you maybe spread out your array when you create it? Or they might ask you like to explain sort of passing by reference. And this is passing by reference here. Knowing this is important, and it does pop up in interviews quite a bit. So what you can do to create a new array here, so you could do work on it, is you could spread this out between the square brackets. And now this is going to be an actual a brand new array on its own. So I'll save this. And now you'll see that in our array inside of here, we've got this should not be here. But then our array on the outside, it hasn't actually got this should be here, or this should not be here. Okay, I hope that's making sense. So by doing this, we can now do whatever we want to this new array, and we don't have to be worried about side effects of working with this data here. So any questions regarding that? Anybody confused? Is this helpful at least? Okay, I'm gonna just hope that it was. All right. So let's now look at what you probably all are here for, which is to find how can you use all of this information that I've given you in JS2 in your assignment. So let me grab the CA or the course assignment. And look at different parts to see where I can assist you. We have taken your feedback into account, and we are going to be, or I'm going to be improving this so that the course content will have a little bit more, not say hints, but some examples that easily tied into this. Okay, so what can I actually help you with here? So the one thing is going to be the search functionality. Okay, so that's one thing which will be one that we can look at here. So let's just say call it, actually no, I don't want to call it search. I want to duplicate this, call this pass by reference. Okay, and then we'll take this data out. Right, so what I'm going to have here is an input. Let's actually just close this like that. And let's get back to our code. Let's put this in the corner actually. Because we've got this input here. Sorry, this isn't going to work. I'm going to have to take this off the screen. Sorry about that. Let's bring the rest of it back here. Okay, and then I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to dock it at the bottom so that we've got all that stuff at the top there, and we've got all of this information over here. Okay, and then let's just close that. Okay, there we go. Right, so we've got this input here, and we can add stuff to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it an ID of just my input. And by the way that I'm going to be like going over the stuff here, this is not necessarily the 100% way you should do it in regards to the input. I'm just like trying to smash out an example very quickly. So we've got the input of an ID of my input, and we've got a placeholder so that it says your name. And you probably have like a class attached to it so that it's styled nicely. Let's just do that quickly. Okay, so we're going to have form input, and then I'm going to create styles.css, bring it down, and we will go and link it. So once again, we can actually make use of these emits, and you can link to CSS. And that's already done most of the work for you. I'm just going to add an S there. Okay. And then the class we created was form input. And then I'll create padding of 20 pixels. Okay, so it's definitely working. So I'm going to go 10 at the top and bottom, and then 30 on the left and right. Save it. Okay, so now it's looking fairly decent. And then maybe just a border, a little bigger, 2 pixels solid. Okay. Let's do some border radius. Yeah, so looking somewhat not too bad. I'm actually going to do one more thing here. Sorry. And I want the left to be closer. So we go top, right, bottom, left. Okay, so let's make that also 10 pixels. I want that actually a little bit bigger. Okay, so there we go. So we've got your name here. Okay. Okay, so we've got our input. Now, what you're going to need to do is you're going to have to be able to type in. Sorry, it's not actually, yeah, it is somebody's name. You're gonna have to type in a person's name, and it's meant to go and sort of do like a drop down. Okay, so what we could have is something like const users is equal to. Just gonna have to just create some dot here. Just give me a second. Okay, so there's an ID of, got an ID. And then we're going to have first name. Well, I'm not gonna be able to think of all these different names. Let's go with Cardi. Lily. I'm just gonna pick someone from chat. We got Mona. Okay. Cool. Right. So we've got these users, right? It's taking up a lot of the screen, but that's fine. Okay. So we're going to have these users that will come from the database, and you will need to go and filter out these users based on your key press here. So what we'll need to do is we probably need to get our input. So something like name input is equal to document.getElement by ID. And then I'm going to grab, what did I call that? Sorry, just give me a second. Let's put this down here. So I called it my input, which is a bad name, but it's fine. Okay, so we've got my input. Okay, I'm just going to console log. Whenever you're selecting elements, always log it out just so that you can see that you do have the element. Because there's nothing worse than you write all your code and then you didn't actually have the element selected correctly. I've used an ID here. I prefer using IDs when I'm grabbing things like name fields and all of that. But that really is an opinionated thing. You could have grabbed it by its class, but I don't like to do that because then your class might change. So I prefer to get it by ID, but this is not the way that you don't have to do it this way. And you can also use the query selectors to get it. You don't have to get it like this. So we've got our name input. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say name input dot, actually, wait, how are we going to do this? Give me a second. You think of how we'd actually do this. So we can say name input, add event listener, then the event we want, and then this will be a function that runs, but I'm actually going to run our own function here, and I'll say handle name input. Wait, handle name input press. Oh, that's a bad name. Naming variables is like one of the hardest things in programming because you want your stuff to make sense. So what I actually want to do is I actually want to call this name control, and then handle name control input. There we go. Okay, so that's I'm way more comfortable with this. Okay, so we're gonna have a function here which is handle name control input, and inside of this is going to be an event. Let's just make sure event. Okay. And then we need to have an actual event here. So I'm going to guess that it's the on press, but that might be wrong. I'll have to check in a moment. No, so okay, so let's go and just check this out. Key press event listener. So it's not on press, it's key press. This is deprecated. Okay, so if you see this, don't ever use it. To go digging for the new one. I think it's maybe just, I'm surprised they don't actually tell us which is the one we should be using. Okay, for now, I'm worried we're running out of time. So what I'll just do is see if I can actually get it to work. Nope. Okay, so hold on. Let's just key press. Might be on key down. So we're going to go with, yeah, it should be key press. Okay, so let's double check here, see where I'm actually going wrong. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I don't know why I didn't get it the first time. It's weird. Okay. So we are now, with this, when we go and we type a key in here, we're getting an event. Or basically this function is getting called whenever we actually got a key press happening for this input. Okay, so what we can do is we can actually get the whole value for this whole control. So let me show you how you can actually do that. So we can pop this open, and then there's a lot of stuff here. So what we're going to probably be looking for is target. And then we want to look for the value at the bottom. I know you won't know this, but it will come with time. So I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. And these are all different things you can use. You can get really creative with all of this. So let's just look for value. There we go. Okay, so there's value. Okay, so value is what's inside of here. So it's event dot, well, I can't remember, it was a target dot value. Let's just save and check. Nope, so it's event dot current. Okay, so I've now got this coming through. And what you're going to want to do so I'm just wondering why we're not getting all of the values. Let's try key up. Okay, that's better. Okay, so yeah, rather go for the key up, and that's now getting all of our values. So I'm just getting a call, but I can take it later. All right, so we've got these values coming in, and what I'm going to say now is I'm going to say const input value is equal to event.current target value, and I'll actually go and console log input value and see what we've got here. And there we go. Okay, so we've now got the values coming out. Right. Now what you're going to want to do is use this input value to filter users that have this name. So what we'll do is we'll say something like const result is equal to what is it at the top? Users. Okay, so users, the filter, we'll have our first user, Okay, so actually let's just console log our user here. Okay, so when you're running it, every time we push a key, it's now looping through these users and it's filtering out. It was not filtering anything yet, but it's looping through all of these users. Okay, so if any of you want to sort of know what, I'm going to give you a little bit of a help in a moment, but if any of you want to challenge yourself, then you probably want to drop off now, because this will sort of help you along with this part. So what we can do is we can say if user.firstname.starts with input value, then we return true. Okay. So what we're saying is that if this first name starts with what we're typing in here, then we want to return that user. But there's going to be a catch here. This is not going to actually work at first. So let's try and get Mona. That's the one that we can see there. If I type M-O, oh, wait, I'm not logging the right thing here, sorry. Okay, so let's refresh this and do that again. So we're going to try and get Mona here. Okay, so I've typed in lowercase m. And it's filtered through these users. So it's going through each one. It checks the first one. It says, is this first name, does it start with our input? And our input's lower m. Let me zoom it in a bit. Then keep it. Otherwise, don't keep it. If you return true, it's going to keep this value. If you return false, it's going to delete this value from our new array that's happening. Okay, so it checks the first one. Does this start with m? No. Does this start with m, lowercase m? No. Start with lowercase m? No. And does this start with lowercase m? No, it doesn't. This doesn't actually start with lowercase m. This starts with an uppercase m. So it's not actually correct. So what we're going to do here is that we need to say first name dot to lowercase. Okay, and then, so it's going to go and convert this name to lowercase. So Mona becomes Mona, like that. And then it checks now. Does it actually check this value? But now what you also want to do is that this input value should also actually be got to lowercase. So that's going to ensure that your input is always going to be lowercase that you want to check with, and the user you're checking with is always going to be lowercase. Okay, so the reason why this is important is so that you're not going to have like a user types in a big M like this, and then maybe the username was a small m. So it's something that you actually often have in programming when you're dealing with strings. You want to just make all of them lowercase or all of them uppercase, and then do the comparison. Because then what we're going to always have is we're always going to be comparing, like let's say the first name is Mona, and then our input is Mona, because we've converted them both to lowercase. So this is a very important thing when it comes to string comparisons in JavaScript. You always want to be dropping them to lowercase or to uppercase. Otherwise, if we have first name is Mona like this, and our input is a smaller one, it's not going to be equivalent. So the trick here is to make sure that your input is always lowercase, and then your input's always lowercase. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to save, and we're going to type in. So let's go with lowercase m, and bam, what we got there. So we now have Mona that's now being filtered. I'm going to make this Ole so that there's two that starts with O and O. So I'm going to start typing O and check it out. We've got two that are being filtered. So we're filtering out, or we're keeping this one because it matches our case, and we're keeping this one. But this is not true over here when we actually filtering, doesn't match this condition, so it gets thrown out. If we return true, it gets kept in this resulting array. But if it returns false, it gets thrown out. But this automatically happens. If we don't say anything here, this is happening behind the scenes for us. Let's just say return false happens magically. The answer is actually it happens implicitly, which is just a fancy word for, oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm not sure if the call is still there. My power's just gone out. Sorry, just give me a second. Okay, I'm just gonna have to go and share my screen. Sorry about that. There's load. But it's fine. I've got battery power. So just give me a second and I'll hop to it. So I'm going to do a new share and hold on. Let's grab take this one. Okay, sorry about that, but at least I'm somewhat prepared. So let's just keep sharing again. Okay, so all right, can I just get some confirmation that you can all see and hear me? Well, I mean, sorry, just see my screen. Okay, cool. Right, I'm terribly sorry about that. We've run over, but it's okay. Okay, so just gonna have to reorientate myself quickly. Okay, we don't want this. So now I'm dealing with a really small monitor. So just bear with me while I try and fix all of this. Okay, so you can go down there and you can come back here. Okay, cool. Let's get some space. Actually, do it this way so that when I move both of them, they'll move. Okay, I don't know why that's not working, but anyways. Okay, so back to what we were saying here. Oh yeah, this happens implicitly. Okay, so this is what implicitly. I'm just going to do spell check. It's one of those days implicitly. Okay, so implicitly and explicitly of fancy words you're going to hear, and it really it took me the longest time. I was too scared to ask, like that meme where you're like, I don't know what implicitly means at this point, and I'm too scared to ask. It's just basically, it's fancy words for saying this happens on its own without you doing anything, and explicitly means you had to like type it out for it to happen. Okay, so we don't have to type return false here. It automatically is just going to return false. All we care about is returning true here. Now, what we can do is we can actually refactor this. Well, actually, before I go there, I just want to just hammer on one more time what we actually did here. Okay, so what we've got is I'm going to take that out. And I'm going to take that out and let's keep the result. Okay, so let's just go over what we're doing again. So we get the input. We've created this input and we gave it an ID. And now let's delete that. We go and we select this input, and then we add an event listener to it, and we're using the key up. I'm going to have to just double check though, like if you should actually be using key up, because then I think on mobile devices this might not be the greatest experience. I think it is fine, but I'm just going to double check for you. Okay, so we've created this event listener, and this event listener is going to call this function. And what it's doing secretly is it's passing an event. Like this caught me up for the longest time. Like I didn't know that there's magically be an event there. Like how do you just know that there's going to magically be an event? And if you go and look in the documentation, this eventually mentions to you how you've actually got the event that gets passed in. But so there's actually this magical event here, and we then use that event to get the value of this control by going to event.currentTarget.value. But then we also set it to lowercase. Okay, because remember we spoke about mono, we only want lowercase mono. Okay, so then on each key press, we're getting our input value. And then we're going and creating a new array that's going to filter out our users. So it's filtering out these users over here. And what we are checking is that, does this first name field start with our input from here? So if we put an M, we're saying, does this first name, we'll start at the top, does this start with a lowercase m? Nope. So it returns false. It doesn't get included in our new array. We try this one. Nope, doesn't get included in our new array. This one doesn't get included in our new array. But then this one is like, hey, you match. You can come along for the ride. So it then gets returned true if it matches that. And remember we spoke about, in this lesson, we spoke about passing by reference. You don't want to be modifying your original array.
That is why these array methods give us back a new array. Imagine this filtered out our original array, how that would break everything. So if we were to go and filter, imagine this was to go and change this, we would lose our original data and we would not be able to work with it anymore. So that's why these array methods will return a new array like this, so that we're not going to be mutating our old array. Okay, I'm not sure if you can still hear me. Okay, you can. I can see the microphone's on. Okay, so one last thing while we just wrap up is that you can refactor this now. Remember, this is returning true or false, whether it stays in or not. And another thing, and maybe we should actually have a session on this, is that when you're doing an if statement, whatever's in here evaluates down to either true or false. Just give me a second. Just making sure that don't have anything else planned. So this does not, sorry, this is always going to evaluate to either true or false. So we could have, I don't want to just lose all of this. So let's just make an example. We can have something like if 5 is equal to 5. Okay, so this is going to always evaluate to true or false. In this case, it's going to evaluate to true, so it becomes true. Okay, then if you had multiple cases, like 5 is equal to 5 and 10 is equal to 10 and 1 is equal to 5, what's going to happen is it's going to evaluate each one. It's going to say, oh, this is true. Then it's going to check this one, and it's going to say if it's true. And then it's going to say, is this one if it's false? And then these get broken down into, they evaluate into true or false. And then eventually you end up with a result of either true or you end up with a result of either false. Because that's important to remember, is that when this is done evaluating, it's basically saying at the end of the day, is it true or is it false? Okay, so the reason why I'm saying that is that where we are checking this if here, if this is going to be, if this evaluates to either true or false, we can just return this. Okay, so that means I can take out that and that, and then I'm going to take out the rest of this. And that shouldn't be there. Okay, so I've messed up my syntax here. There we go. Okay, so now instead of saying if so-and-so, so-and-so starts with that, we are just returning this actual evaluation, because this is either going to be true or it's going to be false. So this is now completely refactored. Actually, let's leave it in there. And just to prove it to you that it still works, I'll type in the M, and then you can see there is the single mono that we're getting. And then if we did the O, we get the, sorry, I'm gonna have to refresh. What I haven't done yet is if we delete and that, we can, there's still a bit more functionality you need to add here, but this is enough to get you going. If I was to add the O, you can see that we've got the Ola and Ola. I'm not saying, I greatly apologize, I'm not saying that correctly. So I'm going to filter it even further. And now I'm filtering into just the one, because I've just got Ola. And then I'm going to put just Olaf. And now we've got nothing, because nothing in our list actually starts with Olaf. Okay, so yeah, that's what I'm going to end the session now. I will be adding more content like this to the course, probably even just over the weekend. I'll let you know when it's actually updated, so you are aware of it. I'm going to stop sharing. No, not now. So, oh wait, my camera's there. Yeah, so I will be updating the content to try and include more stuff like this, but I don't want to be spoon feeding you, because what's important is that you are trying to challenge yourself and trying to figure these things out. When will you upload the video? I will give it, it's actually being recorded by what's the name, by Zoom. So it should automatically, as soon as it gives me the email, and that's between 1 and 3 hours. And then it basically, then it'll be available to you. But I will drop the link as soon as it gets given to me. It uploads to the cloud, and then I have to wait for it to finish. Gives me a link, and then I'll share the link with you. But okay, so I hope that was helpful. I hope that you found the information useful. I'll stop sharing now. Okay. Hope you enjoyed the session and hope it was useful. I will be trying to have more of these and try and flesh out the examples a bit more, so that, like, you are getting challenged, but we are moving away from the way we used to work, where the modules teach you exactly what goes into the CA. So you just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And then what's happening is that people are finished with a course and they're not ready to enter the workplace. And that we can't ethically allow that to happen. We at least from my side, I can't allow you all to feel like you're learning, but you're not. That's not to just watch Udemy videos on ×2 and not do any of the work. I don't want that to happen. And that's what was happening to people just had a copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. So you will be given the tools, and then you need to kind of figure out how to actually do the work. But there are some helpers I need to add in there. For example, maybe I need to show you an example of how we can filter on key press. Okay, everybody, I'm going to have to go. You might hear that beeping. That's my UPS that's about to kick off. And then I'm going to be losing the internet in a moment. So thank you all for the session and for coming along. I will try and do this at least once a week, maybe even 2 times a week, so that that you aren't going to struggle. And if you do have any issues, please just get in touch and I will try and make a video even to help you with anything you need help with. Okay. Right, everybody. Have a great weekend and I'll see you all next week. Cheers.